Hello guys, welcome to a new video of the Fischer series. Today we look at round number 8 of the US Chess Championship 959. It's Fischer against Bernstein, and in this video we see a really aggressive opening played by Bernstein, the Marshall attack, which I can't wait to show you. Fischer has the white pieces and he starts with e4. Now we have e5 by Bernstein, knight to f3, knight to c6 and bishop to b5, the Ruy Lopez or the Spanish opening. Now a6, the Morphy defense, bishop to a4 and knight to f6. Here we have castles by Fischer. And actually on the top level, black usually doesn't take the pawn here. He prefers to bring out his bishop to e7 or the bishop to c5. So bishop e7 leads to the closed Spanish and bishop to c5 leads to the Archangel variation. But what happens after knight takes? Well, then we would have d4, b5, bishop to b3 and d5, defending the knight. Then we have d takes e5, bishop to e6 and knight b to d2, attacking the knight. Knight goes to c5 and then c3, bishop to e7 and the game goes on. But those are some moves you have to know if you play the Spanish and you have to know what happens after knight takes. But okay. That didn't happen. Here we have bishop to e7, the closed Spanish. Now rook to e1, defending the pawn. b5, bishop to b3 and castles. So this has been analyzed a lot. It has been seen a lot. So what white tries to do here is to play c3 and d4 here to get the center. But after c3, black can actually play a really aggressive move. And here Bernstein plays d5 and now we enter the Marshall attack. And the Marshall was actually popularized by Frank Marshall against José Raúl Capablanca in 1918, and he played it with success, since after pawn takes, knight takes, you can see that the e5 pawn is actually hanging here. It's attacked twice and it's only defended once. So after knight takes, rook takes, black is actually arguing here that, okay, I'm a pawn down, but I have way more initiative and I'll get my pieces out sooner, attack your king faster. So here we have a bishop to b7, d4, bishop to f6, rook has to move back, rook to e8. And here taking the rook's not really good, since then we have queen takes. The queen now has to stay on the back rank to prevent back rank mate. For example, queen to f3 is just mate in 1. So we have to play something like queen to f1, but then we have rook to d8. And you can see black's pieces are all getting into the game, while white's pieces are, well, they're not really doing much on the queen side. So that's why the Marshall is a very aggressive opening. And later on, instead of c3, Garry Kasparov or Ding Liren played a4 here, since then after d5 we have a takes, d takes, b takes, e takes, queen takes, and white's actually doing very well here. But okay, Fischer here played c3, but now we have d5 by Bernstein. E takes d5, main line is knight takes, but here Bernstein plays it even more aggressively. He plays e4, giving away another pawn. Since after pawn takes, we have queen takes, and Bernstein is down 2 pawns here. But he has so much activity, initiative. He plays bishop to g4, attacking the queen. Queen goes to g3. Now we have bishop to d6, attacking the queen again. You can see the black bishops are very active here. Now the best move is f4, but then you really weaken those dark squares around your king. So Fischer preferred to play queen to h4. And now we have rook to e8, activating the rook. You should not really take the rook. Then we have queen takes, we have back rank mate problems. You have to play something like f4, but simply taking the pawn. Now we're 1 pawn down, but just look at black's pieces. They're all looking towards the king, while white's pieces are basically locked in here. So after queen to h4, rook to e8, Fischer doesn't take the rook. He plays f3, defending his own rook and attacking the g4 bishop. Now bishop to f5 and d4 by Fischer. And here Bernstein has to play one very sharp move. If he doesn't play this, white's actually in time to activate his pieces and have a better position. So, for example, if Bernstein played rook to c8 here, then we would have bishop to e3, bishop comes back to f2, knight is coming into d2, rooks are activated here, they're connected, and white's doing very well. So here Bernstein plays the only move to keep the advantage, which is bishop takes h2, giving away the bishop. Now we have king takes h2, knight g4 check, the queen is hanging, the rook is hanging, the king is attacked here. Well, you have to either play king to h3 or king to g3 to still defend your queen, right? Well, if you play king to h3, then we have knight f2 check. And here, well, you have a double check here, so you cannot take the knight. And after king to g3, we have queen takes, king takes, and rook takes, and black's just winning. So that's why you have to play king to g3. Now queen takes h4 anyway, king takes, rook takes, but now the knight's under attack, so pawn takes, rook takes, and g takes f5. And now we enter a very critical position. So Bernstein had his attack, he has a better position, he has two rooks, but it's still not so easy to win this. If you look at the position, white has 3 pieces with a total of 11 points and black has 2 pieces with a total of 10. But if you look at the pawns, white's actually up a pawn, but those pawns are doubled. But the problem here is that the a1 rook and the b1 knight are actually paralyzed. If you activate the knight, then you're losing the rook. And if you later on activate the rook, then you're losing the knight. But if you think about it, the c1 rook is also paralyzed, since if you move away the rook, then white gets to activate his pieces. And you cannot take the knight, then you're just losing the rook for nothing. So those 3 pieces are actually out of the game for now. It's a bishop and a pawn extra against the rook. So the best move here for Bernstein is to play king to f8, bring the king into the game. But here Bernstein plays rook to d8, and his advantage is gone. Now Fischer has only one move to keep the advantage, and he finds it. He plays a4. And after a4, Bernstein really doesn't want to take the pawn. Then you get bishop takes, the rook gets activated later on. And if you now try to play rook to b8, after pawn takes, rook takes, now we have rook takes a6, giving away the knight, since we are having back rank problems here with mate. That's why earlier on you should have played king to f8 to prevent that. But okay, rook to d8, now a4 by Fischer, b4 by Bernstein, d5, and rook back to b8. So Bernstein just played rook to d8, rook to b8, and white managed to push 2 pawns here and get a better position. So okay, rook to b8. Now d6 by Fischer, a really nice move, since we want to create a passer here. Now we have c takes d6. And the best move in this position is to play c7. Since after c7 you have to play rook to c8. Now we have c takes b4, rook takes c7, and b5. And if you take the pawn, we take back and we can actually activate our rook again. But here, Fischer played bishop to c4, and now it's equal again. Since now Bernstein has one move again to keep the game equal, which is b takes c3. And after pawn takes c3, rook to c8, bishop takes a6, rook takes c6, the bishop is under attack, bishop has to go back to d3. And in this position, it's actually equal, since the light squared bishop has to keep defending the b1 knight. So we attack the bishop, but it just moves away. We attack it again, it moves away. And if it comes to c2, then we cannot attack it like this. Then we would have rook to a2 and white's actually winning. So after bishop to c2, then we give a check. If the king goes to g5, it's actually mate in 1. It will be mate soon after h5, rook to h1. So it has to go to g3, But then we can simply play rook to f1 and we are boxing in the king. So if you try to make another queen, we have h5, a6, and now it's actually just a perpetual, since after moving the king, this would just be a draw. This would have been the best for Bernstein after bishop to c4. But that's very complex to see all those moves, like it was maybe 10 moves in advance. So Bernstein here plays rook to c8, which is actually not a good move. Now we have bishop takes, pawn takes, bishop comes back, rook attacks the bishop, which we just push the pawn. And now it's really hard for Bernstein to win this game. We have a5, g5 by Bernstein, checking the king. Simply king takes, h6, king moves away. And this is actually a lost position for Bernstein. We will create another passer, and there's no way for Bernstein to even defend this. He has to move the rook, pawn pushes again, bishop attacks the rook, simply king up. And here Bernstein tries to take the knight because he lures away the rook, in which we can take the pawn. But still, it's a bishop and a rook against the rook. And this position more than compensates for Fischer to win the game. And after some pawns get traded off, now we have f6. And there's no way for you to defend this, since the g2 pawn is actually defended by the c6 bishop. And we are actually threatening mate here. So, for example, if you try to push here, simply bishop to e4, cutting off those ranks. And there's no way for you to prevent mate here. So Bernstein actually resigned after f6. I mean, he played a very nice opening. It was very aggressive. He had the initiative, but honestly, the endgame was really hard. He had to find those very sharp critical moves to keep the advantage. And Fischer eventually outplayed him. This was a beautiful game. If you liked this video, please subscribe, like, or comment. And I'll see you on the next video. Bye bye.